we're here to talk about Mary Camarillo. And on the cover of Mary's book, The Lockhart Women, which is on sale here today, I blurbed unputdownable. And I made sure that unputdownable was a word. Because honestly, when I started reading it, I could not put it down. And so I talked to Mary and I said, how do you keep the readers reading? You know, what was it that you did to make this book such a page turner? And she has some ideas that she's going to share with you today. Because at a time when our attention is divided and distracted by technology, when you write a book, you better make sure that it's a page turner, and or you are going to lose your reader, and then they're going to say terrible things about you on Amazon and Twitter and Facebook. So I'm excited to have Mary here, and I'll just turn the classroom over to her and welcome Mary.
I'm happy to talk about Cuba. I went there about 5 years ago and it was wonderful. So, but I guess we'll talk about
the three of us will get together.
How to keep your reader reading. Are you gonna do the slides?
Oh yeah.
I can do them, but.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just like a little donut addled. By the way, there's some donuts back there for you guys. Okay. Yes.
I think we can go to the next slide and we can. You already know, you were all here for the introduction, so I think I can skip that.
Not everybody was.
Not everybody?
Well, I wasn't here earlier. I just came in.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Oh, okay.
and Cal too. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give a briefer introduction. I'm Mary Camarillo. I'm the author of The Lockhart Women. Like Eduardo said, he said it was unputdownable, and what I want to talk to you about today is some ideas I have to how to make a book unputdownable. I said earlier this morning, I'm not a traditional writing background person. I don't have an MFA in creative writing. I never taught English. I took a different path. I've always been a reader. I love theater. I love to travel. But when I got out of high school, I didn't go to college. I went to work, and then I went to Europe with a backpack and saw things I'd been dreaming about. And then I came home and I went to work for the post office. And I didn't plan on staying at the post office for 40 years. Nobody does that kind of thing anymore. But I found a lot of variety of jobs to do at the post office. I started out sorting mail. I ended my career being an audit manager for the Office of Inspector General that has oversight over the post office. So what that meant was I would go into a facility and I have my little clipboard, I'd look down my glasses and I would say, what's wrong here? And you're probably not surprised, there's a lot of things wrong at the post office. I'm a big fan of the post office, but there are a lot of problems. We would find people sleeping, we would find delayed mail, we would find forklift drivers careening around wearing headphones and not stopping at stop signs. So there was lots of things to write about. And then it started to occur to me that really I was writing stories about problems. And that might seem a little odd to think that you can go from writing audit reports to writing fiction, but as I said this morning, you need to tell the truth when you're writing fiction. So I started writing fiction about 10 years ago. I was really lucky to meet Eduardo, who was an early teacher of mine. Did a bunch of workshops, took classes at Irvine Valley Community College and Orange Coast College. I'm from Huntington Beach, California, so I'm an Orange County girl. Yeah, so I'm a voracious reader, and now that I'm a writer, I've realized that my brain does something different when I read. Either I'm trying to figure out how this writer created this kind of magic on the page and how can I copy it? Or I'm trying to figure out why doesn't this work and how can I make sure I don't do that? So that's what I want to talk to you about today. So you can go to the next slide. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about why we keep reading, We're going to read and dissect a classic short story. I'm going to give you some strategies that I think help keep a reader reading. We'll probably do one free writing exercise. I have a bunch of ideas for free writing, but I know we don't have all day. I'm going to talk a little bit about hybrid publishing, which is the route that I took, if you're interested, at the end. And we're going to do a giveaway. So I have raffle tickets. Everybody take one and put your name on it. And I have some good prizes. And it's not, don't worry, I'm not giving you my book.
Well, that's a good prize.
Well,
I'm already on page 6 and I don't want to put it down.
It's unputdownable.
You're right. It works.
yeah, just put your name and I'll come back with my hat. Everybody get one except for you? You did. Right.
And the winner gets what, round trip ticket to New York?
Now I'm going to give away a couple of books which are sitting up here, so we'll talk about those a little bit. Oh no, keep one. You don't do the round.
No.
Business.
Thank you.
Whoever one doesn't have to do it, or you can name it. Just put your name on that one.
This one.
Here one.
Just want to take it.
Yeah, whichever one doesn't have your name on it. I mean, yeah, I'll take the one with your name on it. Right?
I'm so silly. I really want to win.
Here's one more.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay, I don't know who's gonna draw this.
I like
one.
winning stuff.
I never.
Okay.
So it's why I got gavel.
That doesn't stop.
So I want to make this a conversation. Please interrupt me because I have a tendency to keep going, and yeah, I want this to be a conversation because I want to learn from you too. So let's go to the next slide. First of all, how do you choose a book? You go into a bookstore, maybe you try to move this giant cat out of the way so you can pick up that book. Maybe you're judging the book by a cover. Covers are very important. Maybe you turn it over and look at the blurbs on the back to see if there's one from Eduardo Santiago. Maybe you go by recommendations. Maybe you've got a list. I have a list on my phone of all the books that I want to read. So what we do is we read the first line. A lot of times we'll pick up the book, read the first line, and if we like it, we keep reading. If we like the next line and the next page and the next chapter, we keep reading. Just a off-the-wall question. Do you have rules about finishing books? When you start a book, do you insist, you make yourself finish it if you don't like it?
No.
You do? Just informal survey. I have a small newsletter and I sent this question out, and most people wrote back and said, life is too short. If I don't like the book, I'm not gonna finish it. I'm kind of the other way. Like, I think I was a kid, taken to the library, and I get all the books I could read, and I would read them as fast as possible and take them back, and I felt a sense of accomplishment when I finished reading the book. But life is short, so why do we keep reading? You can take the next slide, please. We come to any piece of art, a painting, music, poem, with the mind that just for a millisecond is a blank slate, because we don't know anything about it. And then immediately we start making opinions. We start judging it. We have questions about it. Where are we? Who is this? What's going to happen? What's this about? We all have preconceptions and prejudices. One of my prejudices is, I think I stereotype blonde women who drive white BMWs as driving too fast in my neighborhood. So that's, if the main character is that character, then I already have made some decisions about this person. So we read a sentence, and then the next sentence meanders too much. Maybe we get bored. Maybe we start thinking about, where are we gonna go for happy hour? Where are we gonna go watch the Kentucky Derby this afternoon? If the next sentence is too predictable, we might feel slightly insulted. If the next sentence is completely outlandish, then we're willing to hang in there, usually, because readers and human beings in general are curious people. Next slide, please. I would argue that there are some laws to storytelling. I don't mean rules, because I think rules are meant to be learned and then broken, but I mean laws like physical laws like gravity. Some things just work better in stories than others. We all know people that are terrible storytellers. The guy that cuts my hair, he will stop with scissors over my head, dripping hair, and he'll say, wait, was it Bill or was it Frank? And was it Tuesday or was it Thursday? And maybe it was raining, and it's like, come on, get to the point. Readers expect what they're being told to be relevant. Readers expect escalation. If a story starts with someone sitting alone in a room, the reader expects that someone's going to come in the room or something's going to happen. Readers expect change. If a story starts off once upon a time, the reader might think, okay, this is a fable, there's probably a moral involved, but they're probably going to think also that by the end of the story, whatever was happening at once upon a time is no longer the case. Human beings have always created stories to help us understand the world. Human beings are meaning-seeking creatures. Back in the days of the caveman, they'd stare up at the stars and make stories out of what they saw. Thunder and lightning might mean that the gods were angry at us. If there was rain and we needed it during a drought, we might think that the gods were happy with us. So it's the nature of the human mind to seek out explanations, to search for answers, and to figure out how we fit into this world. Next slide, please.
I have this fantasy that whenever you need the slide change, you just smack me on the head.
I could do that, or I could throw the do that.
Okay.
You might be sensing a theme here with the cats. I don't know, you might have noticed that. So what bores us as a writer is going to bore the reader. What delights us as a writer will please the reader. I know that's kind of a sweeping generalization. A sentence that is vivid, clear, and truthful will keep the reader reading. But how do we do that? Well, I think you know what we do. We read it, we review it, we revise it, and we repeat. We keep doing that until we're satisfied. But if you've ever been in a book club or a writing group, and I know you all have, you know that not everything pleases every reader. But sometimes in a movie theater, everyone will gasp at the same time. And sometimes when someone reads a poem, you look around and everyone's reaching for a Kleenex. And I think honesty is the key. A reader knows bullshit when she sees it. Hemingway said that. Next slide, please. So how do we know if we're being honest and clear and vivid in our own work? We can hire other editors, we can pay our loved ones to read, we can get all kinds of feedback, but it's really us that has to make the decision about how the words are going to end, how they're going to land on the page. George Saunders, who is one of my favorite writers, I really love this book. It's a swim in the lake in the rain. He does this exercise that I'm going to have us go through today, and he gives full permission for people to do this exercise. So don't think that you have to report me to him. But he says that if we can imagine ourselves as readers coming to the page with a fresh eye, and we can observe and think about what when we read, then we can learn to recognize and trust our responses and reactions to what works and what doesn't work. It's hard to see yourself as a first-time reader though, right? You spend so much time, especially on those first lines. It seems like first lines get more attention than any other line in the book sometimes. Next slide, please. So here's Ernest. He is 27 years old here. Here's a cat that I'm assuming is unhappy. And the name of the story is Cat in the Rain. This was published in 1925 in his collection called Our Time, which means that Ernest was 24 years old or younger when he wrote this story, which is pretty annoying. Next slide, please. And you might find this exercise annoying. You might not like Ernest Hemingway. He's of another era. He's misogynistic. He was a troubled soul. Anybody see the PBS documentary about him? It's a pretty tragic life. You might not like the story, but the good news is it's only 1,000 words, so you don't have to wait too long to be finished with it. If you've already read it, anyone here remember this story? If you do, just try to forget anything you know about it. You might not like the characters. I'm not sure that Ernest really likes these characters either. We can talk about that after we read it. I think it's a good example of escalation. It's a well-constructed story, in my opinion. It's quiet, but it doesn't sit still. So you may not like cats. And this is my cat, Riley. He doesn't always like me, but he is in love with my husband. So next slide, please. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass out the first 4 pages of the story, and we're gonna stop after we read a page and answer our questions, say what we're thinking about. What bowling pins have been set up to fall down? What are we noticing? What's in motion? Where are we? What do we expect to happen? Hemingway said we all have built-in shit detectors, and we decide what is shit. Excuse my language. So I'm gonna pass out copies of this story. And what I'm hoping that you'll be willing to do is, I'll read the first paragraph, and maybe we can go around in a few different places. That's just fun. And please don't read ahead. Let's just try to stay really slow. I know it's not the way we normally read, so it's kind of annoying sometimes. But. Okay. Okay, A Cat in the Rain by Ernest Hemingway. There were only 2 Americans stopping at the hotel. They did not know any of the people they passed on the stairs on their way to and from their room. Their room was on the 2nd floor, facing the sea. It also faced the public garden and the war monument. There were big palms and green benches in the public garden. In the good weather, there was always an artist with his easel. Artists liked the way the palms grew and the bright colors of the hotels facing the gardens and the sea. Italians came from a long way off to look up at the war monument. It was made of bronze and glistened in the rain. It was raining. The rain dripped from the palm trees. Water stood in pools on the gravel paths. The sea broke in a long line in the rain and slipped back down the beach to come up and break again in a long line in the rain. The motor cars were gone from the square by the war monument. Across the square, in the doorway of the cafe, a waiter stood looking at the empty space. Eduardo, you want to read the next paragraph?
The
You can read to the end of
American-
the page if you want it.
The American wife stood at the window looking out. Outside, right under their window, a cat was crouched under one of the dripping green tables. The cat was trying to make herself so compact that she would not be dripped on. "I'm going down and get that kitty," the American wife said. "I'll do it," her husband offered from the bed. "No, I'll get it. The poor kitty out trying to keep dry under a table." The husband went on reading, lying propped up with 2 pillows at the foot of the bed. "Don't get wet," he said.
Okay, let's stop there. So next slide, please. So this is the hotel that Hemingway apparently had in mind when he was writing this story. So what are you thinking right now? What questions has this scene set up? Anything you notice?
I'm trying to figure out how the building can face the sea, face the public garden and a war monument all at the same time.
That's a good question. I think he must have a drone. He's like looking at it from the.
So we're in Italy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots being made of going to get this cat. So I'm thinking something's gotta happen, this is gonna be
this setup of, he's leading us to, with his description of spaces in the far, in the medium, and then in the up close. So he's almost like a painter doing that approach. And there's such emptiness and stillness that he's prepared us for, that all of our focus is now immediately on this triangle, just like an artist painting of the American wife, the husband, and the wet cat. So it's very simple to canvas.
And the wife is in a frame, right? She's in the window, she's in a frame. I'm assuming that the husband is in the background. But then when we look at the cat, we're in an extreme close-up of this little thing trying to protect itself.
It seems like there's, he's talking about what's not there. Like normally
Yes.
there's artists there, normally there's vacationers there.
They're not.
They're on vacation, but they're there for a sad reason, because it's a war monument. There's, the cars aren't there, the waiter's disappointed, there's no customers there. It seems like it's about what is not there. I think
Also-
that's a very Hemingway line too, it was raining. Yeah.
Yeah, concrete operation.
Yeah, and also, she doesn't ask if she should get the cat. She just says, I'm going down to get it.
She calls it a kitty too,
Kitty.
Yeah,
which to me makes her sound like she's got a really young voice.
yeah. Or she's very maternal.
I pick up books according to two things. Either I know the author, and I tend to go for suspense thrillers, or I like the title.
Mhm.
And when I pick a book by the title as Cat in the Rain, it doesn't throw me off that this first paragraph is descriptive. It tells you a lot. It tells you the time, obviously after the war. It tells you that we're Americans there, which means that you're not in the US, and it does describe, you know, the rooms and the areas. But there's nothing about the cat. And then all of a sudden he drops it in. And I think that's pretty magic.
Yeah. You know what you said earlier about you read the first sentence and then you read the second sentence and you read the third sentence and you decide if you're interested. The first paragraph, I'm interested. You know, the descriptions are very declarative, they're very clear, they're kind of romantic. If you're like me and you consider rain to be romantic. So there's nothing about this page that would make me say, this is not for me.
There's certainly not a lot of action in the first paragraph, except for those waves rolling in and rolling back out.
Right.
So do you think the husband really wants to help her?
No, he's in bed.
He just offers.
All he says is, don't get wet.
He offers to do it, and any of you who are married know what that means. The offer.
If you don't offer.
You're
You
just
better
like,
offer.
you're not really offering, you're just like, all right, I'll walk the dog,
Yeah.
but you don't really want to.
He
Yeah.
certainly doesn't want to. He
Right.
certainly doesn't want to.
It's raining.
Although
Yeah, right.
It's a
he's
cat.
He's a Southern gentleman, he has to make the offer. Just saying.
Okay.
And what do we know about the cat? It's a her. He said it's saying to herself, trying to make herself so compact. So to me, she sounds kind of helpless and maybe in need of rescue. I don't know. I know a lot about cats, and they don't always want to be rescued, but. Anything else? Should we go on to the next page, page 2?
Yes. I don't know what happens.
Okay. Who wants to go?
You want somebody to read out loud?
If people are willing to. If you don't want to, I'm happy to read. But
Probably part of it.
okay, yeah,
Somebody jumped in and somewhere.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The wife went downstairs, and the hotel owner stood up and bowed to her as she passed the office. His desk was at the far end of the office. He was an old man and very tall. Wait, you'll be over. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The wife said. She liked the hotel keeper. Si, senor, brutto tempo. It is very bad weather. He stood behind his desk at the far end of the dim room. The wife liked him. She liked the deadly serious way he received any complaints. She liked the way he wanted to serve her. She liked the way he felt about being a hotel keeper. She liked his old, heavy face and big hands. Liking him, she opened the door and looked out. It was raining harder. A man in a rubber cape was crossing the empty square to the cafe. The cat would be around to the right. Perhaps she could go along under the eaves. As she stood in the doorway, an umbrella opened behind her. It was the maid who looked out after their room.
Someone else?
Oh, I will. You must not get wet, she smiled, speaking Italian. Of course, the hotel keeper had sent her. With the maid holding the umbrella over her, she walked along the gravel path until she was under their window. The table was there, washed bright green in the rain, but the cat was gone. She was suddenly disappointed. The maid looked up at her. "Ha perdute qualche cosa, signora?" "There was a cat," said the American girl. "A cat?" "Sì, il gatto." "A cat," the maid laughed. "A cat in the rain?" "Yes," she said, "under the table." Then, "Oh, I wanted it so much. I wanted a kitty." When she talked English, the maid's face tightened. "Come, signora," she said, "we must get back inside. You will get wet." "I suppose so," said the American girl.
Okay, let's stop there. So what are we noticing now? She's no longer the American wife by the end of this page. She's the girl now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she becomes more and more like a little child. It starts with the kitty, and now it's, oh, I wanted a kitty, I wanted a cat. So it's interesting how he juxtaposes American wife with girl, and she says kitty on the first page, and now it's cat. So it's almost a reversal of who's the needy one now. I know, this is fun.
Anyone else?
Do you think she identifies with the cat?
She wants something. I'm not sure it's the cat that she wants, but she wants something. I think there's a little more clarity by the end of the story.
Sounds like she wants big.
I sense a certain amount of privilege in this young woman, or wife, or girl. It bothers me a tiny bit how she likes the way he wants to serve her. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe that's just me. Yeah.
Why is she so obsessive about getting the cat? That's what. Why does she want this cat? Why does she want to save this cat? What's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, you go out in the rain, you get the cat, and then the cat's gone. Why does she want this cat?
I think if this story was being written today, the first thing that the writer would let us know is that there are hundreds and hundreds of cats in Italy,
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
right? This is something that we know now that we've all traveled, right? At the time that Ernest Hemingway was writing, we weren't traveling as much. I mean, he did,
Not
but
much
the average person didn't. So that rescuing one cat is really a futile effort, right?
That's the maid's response, like,
No.
And what about the maid? Like, the maid doesn't speak English, and yet the girl insists on speaking English to her.
even though she can speak Italian
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, but
a little.
what I get from this page, really, outside from the description, is that he's introduced two different characters.
Mhm.
And that tells me, I see that I somehow expect those characters are gonna come back somehow. He's introduced the maid, and he's introduced the hotel keeper. And that's what sort of intrigues me more about the page than the rain or the cat, or, you know, it just tells me something's gonna happen.
Because that's a lot. The first page starts off with this beautiful narrative descriptive,
Mhm.
and then we see, oh, okay, there's a wife looking at it, a woman looking at it, and she has a husband. But now by page 2, now we've got, how many characters? 4? Did you count the cat? 5?
Terry, you were gonna say something and I cut you off.
I was just gonna say, the title itself, Cat in the Rain, I think of cats in the rain as, you know, cats are, they're not comfortable with it, they don't like it, right? And as we're reading so far, what I'm picking up is kind of that same sort of thing in their marriage. And she's going out, and now she clarifies that she likes the hotel keeper and these people who are, and someone's paying more attention to her.
Mhm. Yeah, and how does Hemingway do that? Because he doesn't come out and spell that out, right?
Right.
You just get that impression.
Well, a cat in the rain is in a uncomfortable situation, right? A cat in the rain is in a foreign environment. Cats were not meant for water. And then you have this couple who are in a foreign environment as well. I don't
And
know.
on page 1, remember, they weren't speaking to anyone. They don't know anyone at the hotel.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just to me, an interesting observation is how the maid sort of took charge. Right at that particular point, clearly she didn't want to go out in the rain anyway, she could stop that, but, you know, this is a hotel that prides itself on service, and the maid immediately said, hey, let's get back inside, you need to rest, or you'll get wet.
Right,
Yeah.
but the American girl just accepts that the maid is covering her. She doesn't for 1 second say, oh, you're getting wet,
Yeah.
right?
And so she's got
Privilege that you mentioned.
She feels like she's got some power, although you kind of wonder, how much power does she really have?
The maid?
No, the girl.
The girl.
Yeah.
Well, and the response is, I suppose so. She just caved in immediately. So
Mhm.
I think the maid was smart not to try to talk her into, let's go get it together.
Let's go find that cat.
Well, the story's not going that way.
Yeah.
Well, you know, maybe, it seems that she really wants to rescue this cat. And I'm thinking, maybe she wants to be rescued from that relationship. You know, that's what I'm getting out of that.
She's
Because the guy's
here.
back there, just kicking back. And
She's
out
here to
there.
go out in the rain. You know? Yeah. What about the man in the rubber cape? What's he doing in this story?
Well, he certainly is protected.
He's better prepared than anybody else is,
Not
right?
okay. He's gotta be a policeman or something.
Yeah, I kind of like that little line because the story starts out saying it's raining. Then he doesn't want the reader to forget that it's raining still. So he puts the reader right back out and they're in the rain. There's a man with a rubber cape out there. So I think that's pretty effective.
I think he's telling you so much without telling you anything. If you read it carefully. She just wanted to get out of that room. Have you ever been in a hotel room with somebody that you're not really getting along with, and you just like, I don't care where I go, I just gotta go, I just gotta get out of here
Escape
first.
that energy.
Yeah, I gotta escape that energy. Even if it's just to rescue one of Italy's thousands and thousands of homeless cats.
Shall we continue? What's something else?
I think my most telling sentence here. So she says, I wanted it so much. I don't know why. I wanted it so much. I wanted that poor kitty. It isn't any fun to be the poor kitty out on the rain. Somehow it's like perhaps she feels in this relationship that she's not totally fulfilled somehow, and that the kitty represents something that she can hug and caress and love and be a part of, whereas there's a distance from the dialogue. In the dialogues is much more than the description. The distance between the two of them. Very short answers, very short sentences, no emotion whatsoever.
I like how she says she wants it and she doesn't know why she wants it.
Right.
I mean, that's very clearly spelled out. I think that's a pretty smart choice.
It reminds me of that other Hemingway story, A Hill Like White Elephants.
That's a much more famous story, but yeah, similar.
Yeah.
Not really saying what's going on, but you somehow know.
It reminds me of an interview I was listening to on the way here with Terry Gross, and drawing a blank on the name of the writer, forgive me, but she was talking about why did you want to be a mother? So this reminds me of a young woman who has maternal instincts and doesn't know what to do with them. And she doesn't know why, you know, but it just it reminds me of it too. If it's set in the 1920s, after World War I, so many men killed, and so much poverty, so many orphans, and so much need, that there was a lot of sense of you just got to have a baby and protect and hold something good and fresh and new.
I'm a little interested that he's written this so far, giving us no indication of their age.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
they could be a young couple, they could be older.
Except he does call the girl. But women get called girls all the time, no matter how old they are.
Especially back then.
Yeah.
Even the old girl
Yeah.
was something.
Anything else? Should we go into page 3?
Sure.
Anyone else want to read?
Are you talking about on page 3, reading page 3?
Yeah, the top of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just maybe just halfway, or however far you want to go.
I'll read till my glasses give out. They went back along the gravel path and passed in the door. The maid stayed outside to close the umbrella. As the American girl passed the office, the padrone bowed from his desk. Something felt very small and tight inside the girl. The padrone made her feel very small, and at the same time, really important. She had a momentary feeling of being of supreme importance. She went on up the stairs. She opened the door of the room. George was on the bed reading. "Did you get the cat?" he asked, putting the book down. It was gone. "Wonder where it went to," he said, resting his eyes from reading. She sat down on the bed. "I wanted it so much," she said. "I don't know why I wanted it so much. I wanted that poor kitty. It isn't any fun to be a poor kitty out in the rain." George was reading again. She went over and sat in front of the mirror of the dressing table, looking at herself with a hand glass. She studied her profile, first one side and then the other. Then she studied the back of her head and her neck. "Don't you think it would be a good idea if I let my hair grow out?" she asked, looking at her profile again. George looked up and saw the back of her head, close like a boy's. "I like it the way it is," he said. Sorry, I added it, he said. "I get so tired of it," she said. "I get so tired of looking like a boy." George shifted his position in bed. He hadn't looked away from her since she started to speak. "You look pretty darn nice," he said. She laid the mirror down on the dresser and went over to the window and looked out. It was getting dark.
So what are we noticing now? George has a name.
She still doesn't.
And the
Yes.
patron, now the hotel keepers, he's got a different name now too. Whereas she's the American girl.
With the boyish haircut, which was all the rage then, the early flapper period.
Yeah,
the-
it was bob.
The bob, and it was very, very short in the back.
It seems like she's crying for attention. And in the first paragraph, she had a momentary feeling of being of supreme importance. Like she doesn't seem to carry much weight in this coupleship she's in. She wants to be noticed.
That line about feeling very small and tight inside.
Yeah. And it's the first time too that we're seeing inside of her.
If she rescues that cat, she'll feel important, at least to the cat.
It's the first time we get a look at her feelings, how she's feeling small and tight and all of this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a definite contradiction, right? Small and tight and yet supremely important.
Well, the cat is just a reflection of her needs. It's basically, the cat came and went, and now it's, I need this because, and I need this, and her needs are all related to the cat. And I think it tells us a lot about her.
What does George think about this?
That's what I was gonna say, is that, for me, the sentence that stands out the most is, George was reading again. Which comes right after she's telling him what she needs, what she wanted.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he just ignores it.
I think George has a slight moment of redemption when he says, "You look pretty darn nice." That's generous of him, but I think it was his idea for her to cut her hair. It sounds like it. I interrupted someone, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that was kind of a token comment from him. He knew enough to say something appropriate that you look pretty darn nice. I'm not getting a lot from George.
I don't think George wants a wet cat in his room either.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a shift though, from the cat immediately into this discussion about her appearance and all that. It's just
Yeah.
right in the middle of the page, shifted.
Yeah, it's very. I like Carol's point about not wanting that wet cat in the room and going.
I think she wants to get pregnant, and George likes boys.
You know anything about Hemingway?
Right?
Yeah.
This pretty much sums up his first marriage with Mary
Yeah. It's based on his first marriage.
Oh, yeah, well, you can tell.
Yeah.
I read
Yeah, it could be a
this.
statement of her sort of wanting to transition more into a more female, maternal type
Right.
environment, so yeah, I don't know.
But that's what he loved about his first wife, was her naturalness and her boyishness, her athleticism, all of that. Really in contrast.
I know this isn't really a story about how to end this isn't a workshop on how to end the story, but do you think the story could end like when George was reading again? Could that be the end of it? Would that feel satisfying or surprising, or would you be done with the story?
I still want to know about the cat.
Yeah. There's these bowling pins are up in the air still, right? Like they haven't all landed yet.
I mean, I don't think we're ever gonna find out about the cat. That cat's gone. I think.
Seems like it.
Anything else?
She's got enough food for
It
the
is
cat.
titled The Cat in the Rain, not the lady trying to find a cat in the rain.
Yeah, that's right, that's a good point.
The cat in the rain.
I think the wet cat is in the room.
Yeah.
That's what we're
Yeah,
hearing.
that's what, you think you wet blanket.
Which one is it?
Which one is the cat?
And just to talk a little bit more about this supreme importance, I don't know, if you've had the experience of being in a place where, a country where you don't speak the language, you don't really know the rules, but you're staying in kind of a nice hotel, So I know myself, I kind of feel like, wow, look at me, I'm living a large life here. And then people are so nice to you, well, they're getting paid to be nice to you, but it's their job. And you think, well, yeah, my economic strata, I mean, I know this sounds really petty and superficial of me, but I think, wow, I'm like a rung up above these people. But these people know the language, but I don't. They know all the mores of the town, and I don't know. So I really get that feeling small and tight, and also supreme importance. I think that's really interesting.
I think that what she means by a feeling of supreme importance is that she has the ability to procreate.
Ah, oh.
It's Laura and I are getting that same vibe.
Are we?
Yeah. About
Yeah.
me.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit.
That's the only power a young girl has,
Mhm.
then anyway.
So how are we feeling about her now? Do we like her? Do we dislike her? Do we feel sorry for her? Is it all of that at the same time?
We need about another novel about her.
I want her to get a backbone, but I'm bringing that mindset to 1920.
Oh.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
want her to get some starch.
Yeah.
You think she'll get some starch on the next page?
I didn't peek yet, I don't know.
Okay, well let's go to the next page and find out.
Oh, that's the last page.
I think she got the cat and got herself another room.
Do we have time for starch with just half a page?
Okay, anybody want to take a gander at reading, or you want me to read? I want to pull my hair back tight and smooth and make a big knot at the back that I can feel, she said. I want to have a kitty to sit on my lap and pet and purr when I stroke her. Yeah, George says from the bed. And I want to eat at a table with my own silver, and I want candles, and I want it to be spring, and I want to brush my hair out in front of a mirror, and I want a kitty, and I want some new clothes. Oh, shut up and get something to read, George said. He was reading again. His wife was looking out the window. It was quite dark now, and still raining in the palm trees. Anyway, I want a cat, she said. I want a cat. I want a cat now. If I can't have long hair or any fun, I can have a cat. George was not listening. He was reading his book. The wife looked out of the window where the light had come on in the square.
It's a lovely ending.
But is it the ending?
No.
Oh, it isn't.
Does it feel like an ending?
No, because in its opening sentence, he makes a point, number one, it said, there were only 2 Americans staying in the hotel. That to me, and then the rest of it tells me that in a way, he's, all these other artists coming to paint, look at the monument, the reasons why people are coming to this hotel, you know. Well, how little of these 2 little Americans are that their whole interest there is a cat, where all these other people here, you know, and they are the only 2 in the hotel, so he's singling out the idiosyncrasies of these 2 Americans who are there, and all they're talking about is a cat, and there's a museum, and all these other things happening. That's what got to me about that opening sentence, that immediately, you know, it makes you think, wow, you know, that these people were different to their surroundings.
Yes.
In a sense.
It's a good.
Anybody else? Yeah.
One thing that, as I look at this, I think that we Americans are used to treating cats and dogs as pets. In many other countries, they're not pets.
Right.
They're just
They
out
run
there.
around free.
Yeah.
They're rat killers.
You know, whatever. They're chase the rats, but they're not pets like we treat pets. We spend so much money here on pets, and our dogs and our cats, and it seems like everybody specializes in the cat doctor, just treating only cats. And I think that's the situation here. She's more used to treating the animals as pets, as opposed to all the rest of the people there. They could give a damn about the cat.
Okay, well, I kind of tricked you guys, because that's not the end of the story. Just a few more lines.
Is that okay?
I like
Well, we'll see what you think about
I
this.
think Mary has a point here to teach us.
Thank you.
It's not very long.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Mary, you had a calling as an English teacher, I swear. This is gonna make a compelling class. I'm gonna copy you.
Well, I stole this from George Saunders, so he's.
Oh, that's right,
yeah.
you mentioned George.
But George Saunders says, use this however you want it, so. Okay, anyone want to read the last few lines?
I'll do it. Someone knocked at the door. Avanti, George said. He looked up from his book. In the doorway stood the maid. She held a big tortoiseshell cat pressed tightly against her and swung down against her body. Excuse me, she said. The padrone asked me to bring this to the signora.
Lovely.
Yeah, we have 2 wet cats in the room.
Papa George.
Yeah.
You can go to the next slide. You can skip a couple. Okay. These are Hemingway's cats. Go back.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, these are, I went to Key West right before the pandemic, and these are the 5-toed cats, descendants of his original ones. They have a beautiful graveyard there. They don't care, they're well fed, they don't care about human interaction. If they feel like being petted, maybe they'll let you pet them, but you know, typical cats.
This is in Key West?
Yeah. I've been to the one in Cuba too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Remember, his house in Key West, which is preserved, still is filled with dozens and dozens of cats.
Yeah, and these cats are from that house, yeah. So my question to you, was it the same cat?
Oh.
Ah, yes, good question.
I mean, if you go back to the beginning, the cat is only described as being crouched underneath the table. There's no description of color.
It was a kitty,
It was a kitty.
so it was small.
I would argue if we said Eduardo parked his car in the parking lot, he left in a red Corvette, I would think,
I would think
Eduardo's
that's
got
not
something going
important.
on and he's got 2 different cars. I mean, the fact that Hemingway doesn't describe the cat in the beginning, I don't know. But why does he do that? Is he trying to trick us, or do you feel tricked? Do you feel manipulated?
I feel disappointed. I like the original ending.
And it doesn't say this cat is wet.
It's not the same cat. I really don't think
It
it
can't be
is.
the same.
That's my opinion. A couple other things I noticed here, though. She gets to be called something else at the end of the story, which I really like.
Oh,
Now she's Senora.
Senora.
That's the most respect she's been given. So she got a cat she doesn't want, but or maybe she's fine with the cat.
And somebody finally heard her.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that what we're hearing here is that if she wants somebody to give her a cat, it's going to require another man to do it.
Because it reinforces why she liked the padrone. When she passes by, he uses all those descriptions
Big hands.
of strength, yes, of masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's the one who tells the maid.
Tell
To
the
bring-
senora that if she wants a cat,
Yeah.
I'm the guy for the job.
But doesn't Senora depict an older woman rather than Senorita, which
Well,
would be
Well, you know as well as I do that it means married or not married, right? Depending, regardless of the age, right?
And this first wife was actually older.
Signorina.
the Signorina.
Anyway, even though she looked young.
Yeah,
she
this
wasn't.
story is actually written about his first wife, Hadley, and she was 8 years older than he was
Yes.
when they married.
I
She,
really
Hadley is the
like
one
that.
that infamously lost his manuscript of his novel on the train. And she supposedly really wanted a cat, but they were staying with some friends, Ezra Pound, I think, and there wasn't room for a cat, so Hemingway said, no, you can't have a cat. And
So
he
it
said
really
they're
is
also
about
too
a cat.
poor, so. Yeah, so do you think Hemingway likes these characters? Because it really seems like they're based on him and his wife, but I don't really feel like, personally, I don't really feel that he thinks these are exemplary human beings. I don't really feel a lot of love towards them from him.
You know, he exemplifies here the post-war, where all of the intellectuals, they try to be extremely objective and almost like they're approaching it from a newspaper reporting or the traditional.
Which he was,
old
a
way.
reporter, so,
Yes.
yeah.
So he's using his pure reporter's eye to look down like he's swooping in from the sea, he's bringing us in from the sea, then closer and closer in, and it's very, very objective. I find this fascinating, Mary. I'm really glad you are having this.
Good, yeah.
Question, in traveling back at that time, was it common for pets to be allowed in hotel rooms?
That's a good question.
Because if not, he might be assuming that, well, they couldn't do anything about it anyway while they're in the rooms.
In Italy, pets or animals are everywhere. Like they come
France.
into your restaurants, they go into stores, so I don't think it would be
Okay.
like here.
I had a question. Is this pre-war Italy or post-war Italy? I was looking for clues. I didn't find where. Was it pre or
He
post?
wrote it in 1925. I think it was published in 27. Did I have that right?
So it's
So-
before the war.
After the war, so
After
they've
World
had
War I, I
time.
think.
They've had time to put up a monument.
Which
and for
war?
people to come.
World War One.
Yeah,
Yeah,
after
World
World
War
War I.
Yeah, actually it was published in 1925, so he
Okay.
wrote it a few years earlier than that, so probably right after the war.
Going along with Gillian's comment about train.
The reporters.
The reporters, I didn't care too much about the characters. I had trouble caring
True, yeah.
about them. And at one point on, let's see, on page 4, the first line, she's describing her, that I can feel. This, again, I'm angry with this girl. I want her to have more starch, as I said before. But she's yearning to feel something. That I get, that I felt during it, but I didn't care a whole lot because I didn't think they were doing a whole lot about it, except the maid and the,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel kind of sorry for her. I really think she does want a baby. I think that's what this is kind of about. I think this marriage is not gonna last very long.
Oh, he's so self-centered.
But I'm frustrated with her too because she keeps saying she wants a cat, and that's what she gets.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is the same wife that he forced to have an abortion
I don't know.
in that other story? Or convinced?
It could be. I'd have to do research on when that other story is written. Yeah, that could be. He's
Why,
very.
I'm intrigued, why did you select this story?
Because it's short and it's easy, it doesn't take a ton of time to get through.
Sure.
I'm a Hemingway fan, I'll admit it. I mean, he's got problems, but I like his journalistic approach. I like that kind of zeroing in, like you were saying. Yeah, and it's interesting the contrast between the way men and women behave then and the way that we behave now. Some things have changed dramatically, some things not so much. I think women are still in marriages that they don't have any agency, and so, yeah.
We don't have any idea of why they were traveling though. So if they were traveling for fun, of course it was raining, so she can't have any fun while it's raining. She explicitly says, I can't have any fun if I can't have any fun. The long hair, and that's more complicated, I think, with it. But it's almost, is she reacting to the situation right then with the rain, and they can't do anything, and she's lonely, or husband's paying no attention to her, and so the cat and the whole maternal things are coming around. It's complicated.
Yeah, and we don't know, does she have a job? Is she supposed to be doing some kind of work, or is she just along for the ride? I mean, that gives her a lot of privilege and no responsibility, so it makes it harder to feel sorry for her. but maybe her job is to be his wife and she
That's
thinks it
it.
includes having children, and he says, no, not so much.
No, just to be his wife, the center, yeah, he is the center. But we only know that because if we know anything about Ernest Hemingway, we can apply that. Like Carol was saying earlier, we bring our own experiences and prejudices. You pointed it out too. But for Hemingway he's like looking at a gorgeous black and white photo in his writing. It's so stripped down to those essentials. And there's very little to distract you, like gorgeous color, like a gorgeous color photograph that, maybe somebody more like, well, you can name any of 100 writers who are very floral in their approach to writing, not him. But there's something very pure about it, I think.
So I'll leave it up to you guys. The next slide is a writing prompt. Do you want to do a little free writing? Do you want me to keep going?
Maybe a 5-minute break.
I'd love to hear
Maybe
you.
take a 5-minute break?
We're at the top of the hour. so-
Okay, let's take a break. I'm gonna, maybe we won't do writing prompts, but I got these writing prompts. My friend wrote this book, 5-minute daily writing prompts. It's one of the giveaways today. And I got all the prompts out of this book. I think it's really brilliant because you guys use writing prompts a lot.
Yeah.
It's hard to come up with new ones, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so but these are all felt really fresh to me. So, yeah, this one I was gonna have you do, maybe we won't. But she had write the last scene of a romance, including a dog, a watch, and a kiss. And I thought that's pretty close to the Hemingway,
Yeah, it is.
I think we had the book. And you want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay,
I like
all right.
listening to
You want
you
to take a
guys.
break and then come back and write? Okay. If you want to pick the prompt about the dog, the watch, and the kiss, or you want to pick the one about the cat, the book, and the knock on the door, or it doesn't have to be a romance, and you can use an elephant, I don't know, a pair of shoes, and a slap, however you want to do it. But yes, maybe just 5 minutes, and then if you want to share what you have.
I can hardly hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Microphone.
Oh yeah, that's what the microphone's for. Yeah, so I'm suggesting that you choose one of these prompts. The first one is a dog, a watch, and a kiss, and the second one is based more on the story, a cat, and a book, and a knock on the door. Feel free to revise however you want, whatever
Yeah.
3 things you want to write about, but yeah, let's do 5 minutes.
Are you going to time us or?
I'm
should-
gonna time you.
Okay. Until
5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes. Go.
How did that go?
Fast.
Yes, that's what I asked.
Anybody want to share what they have?
Carrie does.
No.
No, the gentleman right there said he would.
I'm sorry?
You said you would, right?
All right, I chose the dog, a watch, and a kiss.
Okay.
He wasn't coming, she just knew it. After 2 years in prison, and the way all the things that were left unsaid, why would he come back to her? She kept looking at her watch and waiting. She heard a rustling sound and bark outdoors. Sam, her ever-faithful watchdog, was wrestling someone on the ground. Oh my goodness, she thought. He's attacked someone in the neighborhood. But as she ran out, her heart missed a beat. It was Jake. Her lost love had come back to her. She dived into the pile with Sam and kissed Jake like there was no tomorrow. He had come home.
Nice.
Wow.
It's very romantic.
That's the first romantic thing I ever wrote.
Wow, well done.
Good job. Everybody has to read, so.
Oh.
I know, I'm a meaner teacher than you
You are
are.
a high school teacher.
Okay. The dog bounded down the stairs, a Great Dane, tall and princely. He landed next to me, laid down and crossed his front paws on my left wingtip shoe. Good God, I thought. She didn't tell me she had a dog. I felt nailed to the floor. The dog kept his eyes and his feet on me. I glanced at my watch. My date told me to be there at 8 p.m. and I was. I looked again at my watch. Come on, lady, put on your lipstick or whatever you're doing. Come downstairs and let's get out of here. The dog moved his head. I moved mine. We looked up. She came down the stairs, kissed the dog's head, and said, "Let's go."
Well done. Yeah.
Great Dane, I know where that came from. It's terrific. How do you think the date's gonna go?
I don't know. I know the guy, yeah. I know the guy is glad to get out of there, whatever else.
Okay. I brought the wrong glasses. This is why I keep looking at it, realize this is like this reading glasses, so I'm going like this. Okay. There's something about the puppy that reminded her of him. The large brown eyes, the unruly head of hair, the way the puppy looked at her, perhaps. He comes from our best breeder, the shop owner said. He'd been looking at her for a while, sizing her up. There was a sadness about her, he thought, not like most people who came to his shop to buy a puppy, oohing and eyeing from cage to cage at every time. Is he? She responded. It reminds me of someone. I get that. My husband. That happens often, said the shopkeeper. People get a pet that reminds them of someone. I don't know if I want to think of him a lot. Why? He's been dead for a few years.
Oh. That's a lot in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
It's not very romantic.
Yeah,
It's heartbreak.
Yeah, very, just romantic. Well, it looks like if we're going around the room. I didn't do much, so Terry, take heart.
I did less.
Did you? Okay, because I tried to be a little Hemingway-ish without success. I could do it satirically. There was a pounding at the locked shop door. It had been delivered by the edge of a powerful fist. The woman let out a reedy noise beyond a scream. The stack of photography journals fell from her hands onto the cat's back, thus beginning of a so-called romantic scene.
Well, we expect the rest of it next month.
All right, all right.
You have your assignment.
Yeah.
And I can't see either because I don't know.
Anyone else?
I'll go. There was a knock on my door in the middle of the night. I put my book down. I peeked through the blinds and saw my neighbor dressed in a skimpy black catsuit. I forgot it was Halloween. I should have been dressed by now. My lovely kitten and I were going to a very late Halloween party. Very late Halloween party. She had a bottle of tequila in hand. We were going to have a good time.
That sounds very Palm Springs.
Oh. I like the cat suit.
All the elements were there.
Anyone else?
I'll go. I don't do these fast ones very well. Brett checked his watch, 10 minutes to 12. Julie will be here any minute. He picked up the basket when she arrived, meeting her at the door. Handing her the basket, she lifted the lid. A golden retriever puppy popped out, giving her a sloppy kiss. Happy birthday, my love.
Aww. Got the kids right there.
Everybody's read but Terry.
Terry, it's okay. This is your first time
Terry,
here.
yeah, you get the grace of the first visit, but
Yeah.
Okay.
we would love to hear.
Oh, so I'm being excused? because
Yeah.
I first, okay.
If you want to be excused.
Yes, please.
If you want us to
No,
beg.
I'm too in my head and that internal editor. we
It's
were
very
going on this.
hard, yeah.
It's, so I spent most of the 5 minutes thinking about what I was gonna present and all that.
I honestly don't like writing notes so much myself. I feel
Yeah.
really pressured, and I think I'm always scratching everything out.
Yes,
and
I
then
don't like it.
I can't read what I wrote, and so I mean, it's not supposed to be stressful though, right? It's supposed to be fun, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
sometimes it's super useful because you find something really creative that you never would have thought of. But yeah,
I think it could be very useful actually, but, yeah, I'm finding myself not wanting to put anything on the paper because it has to be written perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we all know that.
so that Annie Lamott book, Bird by Bird,
Yes.
the shitty first draft.
Yeah. the
You have to
city
put
first
something
draft.
down so you can revise it. Yeah. Okay, we can go to the next slide, I guess. I think I would read all of these stories, so I'm not really sure how much you need me to tell you about strategies that I have thought of to keep your reader reading. But I think there's 3 categories that kind of all overlap. I'll probably go through this pretty fast because we have like half an hour. So, okay, first, keep it real. Second, subvert the reader's expectations. And third, build an unput-downable structure. Next slide, please. So an authoritative voice keeps things real. And people love to read about work. I know I do. I love to read about people's jobs and how they do them. What we know about personally makes us unique. For example, Joe Friday's voice in the beginning of Dragnet, if you're old enough to remember that, this is the city. Right away, like you see the LA skyline and you think, okay, I'm in capable hands of someone that knows the city and knows all the gritty stories. In the Lockhart Women, here's a cheesy example. I worked for the post office for 40 years. I felt like I could write about people that work at the post office with pretty much authority. Another example, John Grisham. His novels can be a little bit formulaic, but we know he's got authentic experience based on reality and told with honesty. Okay, next slide. Anybody in here write YA? I understand that YA has a rule that the bomb has to go off on the first page because young readers theoretically are reluctant readers and you have to grab them from the start. I think that's not only true of young readers, I think could be true of adults too. So you want to start in the middle of action. For example, CSI doesn't ever start with characters trying to decide what they're going to wear to work that day. They start with a dead body. The beginning of Saving Private Ryan. It starts with this horrific scene of violence in Omaha Beach. So horrific and difficult to watch that when I saw it in the theater, the man in front of me who was a little bit older got up with tears in his eyes and walked out of the theater. But he came back because he was emotionally invested. Readers expect something to happen. Next slide. Specific detail creates reality. It draws the reader into the story and it keeps them reading. Characters need physical and weighted characteristics. What do I mean by weighted? A gray-haired woman sits at a table at a cafe in Italy. Okay, so we know that the woman has gray hair and she's capable of sitting in a chair. If I say a gray-haired woman sits at a cafe in Italy, looking down proudly at her red leather boots, swinging her toe back and forth, well now, this woman's got an attitude. Either she's proud, she's materialistic, maybe she stole those boots, maybe it's the first pair of nice boots she's ever had, but now we know more about her. That's a weighted characteristic. Each time the writer specifies something, the reader adds it to that little thought bubble above their head. And what I found as a writer, that giving specific details is very helpful. For example, in the Lockhart Women, there's a scene where the wife is piling all of her husband's clothes in the middle of the living room with the intention of throwing them away. And she tells her two daughters, you can take whatever you want. So the youngest daughter takes the Swiss Army knife and she keeps it like a treasured memento. So I'm thinking, oh, I've introduced a knife. Is that like introducing a gun, maybe? Maybe this knife needs to appear later on in the story, and it does. It kind of gives the reader a through line to follow the story. Details give the story fabric and makes it seem real. For the Lockhart Women, I had to do a ton of research about the O.J. Simpson trial. I was there during the period of time. I didn't know I was going to write a novel about it. But I read all the books by all the attorneys. I read a book by O.J., which was pretty disgusting. I also read the LA Times online every day from 1994 to 1995, just to see what people were talking about, how they were writing about the trial, what kind of weather there was, what people were wearing and listening to. Because if you get those details into your reader's head, they believe that it's a real story. If you get one of those details wrong, you're going to lose credibility. Like if I would have said OJ ended up in the Antelope Valley instead of in Brentwood, you'd think, well, this person doesn't know what she's talking about, so why should I read this? These changes, details are really cool because you can change them. Like Hemingway changes the name of the woman from girl to wife to finally Signora. In my novel, I changed the knife from a treasured keepsake to something much different by the end of the novel, so no spoiler alerts. Next slide, please. This is a writing prompt that I was going to use, but I think it's helpful to talk about making inventories for your characters. Tim O'Brien did this brilliantly in The Things They Carried, where he talks about all these Vietnam soldiers, American soldiers in Vietnam, and what they were carrying with them. In this prompt, you would be picking something out of your character's refrigerator and saying why it's important to them. But I think if you know what's important and what is not to a character, it's really helpful. Okay, next slide. Subvert the reader's expectations. So we're setting a reader up to think something, to expect something, and then we want to twist around who they think this character is, what the character wants, what they decide to do. Because if the character feels conflicted, then the reader's going to feel conflicted too, and that will keep her reading. Next slide. So characters need to be complicated. They have to do something excessively, be opinionated, be passionate. My favorite opinionated character is Olive Kittredge in Elizabeth Strout's novel of the same name. Olive is opinionated about every single thing in her world. And we would think she was a horrible person, but Elizabeth Strout did this brilliant thing of showing her from different perspectives. We see her from the neighbor's point of view, her husband's point of view, her son's point of view. In Hemingway's story, the wife feels small and supremely important at the same time. So the reader feels conflicting emotions about this person. Some of us are like, want her to get a spine. Some of us think, stop feeling so entitled. Some of us think, just say what you really want. So if the reader's conflicted, then she'll keep reading to figure out how she feels. And life is complicated, right?
Yeah.
So things in real life can be many things at once. Next slide. Give characters lots of trouble. Put them in a predicament and have them work their way out. A good example of that is Stephen King's Misery. There's a romance novelist. Maybe this is your next career path. He's tired of writing romance novels. He wants to kill off his character. He gets in a horrible accident and he meets Annie, this nurse who he thinks is an angel of mercy at first, until she finds out he's going to kill off her favorite character, and she starts chopping off pieces of his body. She wants a character to stay alive. The novelist wants to keep his body parts on his body. Every character should want something, even if it's only a glass of water. So Stephen King has a writing book called On Writing, and he advises, pay attention to how real people behave. Tell the truth about what you see. Personally, I don't know any real people that chop off people's fingers and toes, but if you do, you might want to take notes. Okay, the next slide. This is actually something I got from Eduardo. He's the master of teaching this. I'm going to go through it really quickly. But paying attention to rising action in a story keeps the story real and complicated. There's an inciting incident over on the far left. Some unexpected thing that happens upsets the status quo. The story starts moving up to a climax. For example, the situation comes out of nowhere. The main character goes into turmoil. They have to spend the rest of the story trying to figure out their problem. I would argue that this line is not straight like that, though. It's a jagged line. The character starts making decisions, and we see... Sorry? The character starts making decisions, and the reader watches the decisions and either thinks, oh my God, how foolish, don't do that. Or the reader has hope, and regardless, they keep reading. Rising action can be quiet, but something needs to happen. So these little jagged points along the edge that I call decision points in the next slide, they give the reader a concrete expectation. If they're crisp and pronounced, then the reader thinks, okay, I know where this is going. She's gonna go get that cat. But then, no. And Hemingway could have made a lot of choices. He could have had her get the cat. The cat doesn't want to be saved, so the cat scratches her and she ends up in the emergency room. Or something else could have happened. Maybe she would have actually found the cat and rescued it. Maybe that's what the reader was expecting. But subverting the reader's expectation, even slightly, keeps the pages turning, because the reader thinks, hey, how did I miss that? Was I wrong about that? Or was I right? What's going to happen next? Next slide. So my problem isn't making things happen. I can think of things that happen. We all are creative people. We can go around the room and think of 20 things that could happen. The problem is making one thing appear to cause the next thing. The classic example is the king died and the queen died. Okay, who cares? People die. History books are full of royalty dying. But if we say the king died and the queen died of grief, then we're onto something. Then we have a cause and an effect, and we have a story. So we don't want to make things happen for no reason. We want to make things happen and have them matter. And we could talk more about this. Cause and effect is not really that sexy to write about. I think Hemingway's a master at it, though, because he talks about that glacier effect where 20% is above the water and all is below. He knows all the causes and effects, so he doesn't have to tell us everything because we can figure it out. Good examples of cause and effect, if you watch slapstick comedy, like the Marx Brothers, or I had two younger brothers, their favorites were the Three Stooges, which drove me crazy. It's all the, sticking the finger in the eye and watching people fall down, and it's not exactly literary, But it's important to pay attention to it because you see how it's a domino effect. One thing happens and another thing happens and another thing happens. Okay, I know I'm going a little bit fast, but we'll go to the next slide.
You're going at a good pace.
Okay, good.
Right.
So I think this is an example of a cat with a really nice structure. I really like the lines of this cat. So I'm going to talk about some methods and strategies to design a structure that might be unputdownable. Go to the next slide. You can put a boundary around the story. This puts pressure on the characters and adds tension, so then the reader feels the tension too. One way of putting a boundary is to have a ticking clock. So there's a set amount of time to reach a goal or there's going to be consequences. For example, Cinderella. She has to get back to her coach before midnight or it's going to turn into a pumpkin. Another example, the movie Speed. Sandra Bullock's got to keep her foot on that gas pedal, keep the bus over 50 miles an hour, I think 50, or the bomb's going to go off. There has to be significant consequences. For Cinderella, she's living with a terrible stepmother and evil stepsisters. She needs to get home before they do, and she needs to be home so the prince can find her the next day, right? And Sandra Bullock, there's live human beings on this bus, so we don't want to see them explode. Another example of a boundary kind of method is surround the story with a secondary story. Shakespeare does this a lot, plays within the play. Midsummer Night's Dream, Hamlet. It gives the outer story greater meaning because the reader or the theater goer gets to see different actors, different voices portraying the same story. So they start to uncover relevant themes and situations. Another idea is to bookend a story. Hollywood does this a lot. I don't know if you watch that TV show, This Is Us. I'm a big fan of it, but it's about a family going through a long period of time, and we see these people at all different stages of their life. And we know, okay, that character is not gonna die until the end because we see him old. But we still wanna follow the journey and see what happened to this character and how was his life. Another example is Titanic. We see Rose at the beginning of Titanic as a very old woman talking about being on the Titanic, and then we switch to beautiful Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. And we know that Rose is gonna make it to the end. We don't know about Leo, but we keep watching because we wanna see what happens. Another method, and here's another cheesy example from my book, you can scaffold the story around a historical event. Like I use the O.J. Simpson trial to build my story around. First-time novelist, it was helpful to me to have some kind of plot driver. People of a certain age remember where they were during this trial, so they bring those memories to it. It allowed me to dig out some themes that I wasn't really aware I was doing. Like, for example, there's an entitled athlete in my story, similar to the one in the Simpson case, who literally gets away with murder. So, yeah, I think readers are aware of the timeline, they know where they were, they might want to follow the story because they want to see how these characters react. Okay. This is a writing prompt from this book, but I did something similar. This is where I got the idea to frame my story around the Simpson trial. I was in a writing group that we'd give ourselves assignments, and one assignment was, okay, put your story up against a historical event. And I was already writing about the 90s, and I thought, okay, Simpson, that's a pretty big story then. So it was very helpful as a framing device. Next slide. My husband is a huge fan of outlaw motorcycle stories like Sons of Anarchy and the Mayans. And he was telling me about a recent episode where they lined up all the members of the motorcycle gang in preparation for execution. And then the show stops. So he's like, he's got to watch the next episode, Even I asked him, like, what happened,
Feels soap opera.
This is kind of a genre-dependent strategy. It can annoy me a little bit because it feels kind of manipulative. Dan Brown, who wrote Da Vinci Code and a bunch of other books, he's a master at this. He'll have something unexpected happen at the end of a chapter, like there's a dead body, or a stranger comes to town, or there's some mystery that is unveiled. And then the next chapter, he doesn't even mention that at all. So you have to keep reading because you want to know what happened. He set you up to know what happened. So it keeps the pages turning. I would argue there's maybe better ways to transition chapters than that, but it works for Dan Brown. Next. Okay, short chapters. This is apparently really popular in YA fiction. In doing research for this, I heard these called potato chip chapters. So it's the amount of reading a reader can do while they're eating a small bag of chips. Maybe 10-minute segments, 1,500 words. So that way you know, you can thumb ahead and you go, okay, I just have a few more pages, I don't have to be back at work. So you know you can pause, but the interesting thing that happens is people don't pause. They think, well, just one more chapter, because that one's short too. So it does keep readers going through the work a lot faster. I didn't follow this example in the Lockhart Women. My chapters are like 26 pages, so I might do something different in the second one. Do you like novels without chapter breaks? Like there's Marilyn Robinson's Gilead, which won the Pulitzer Prize. No chapter breaks at all. But some readers prefer to decide when they want to take their breaks, right? They don't necessarily want to be driven by the author saying, okay, this is the end of that chapter. Some examples of what I think are really good uses of short chapters. Have you read Tommy Orange's There? It's about a really violent powwow at the Oakland Coliseum. It's a multiple character point of view. By the end, Tommy Orange is just flying. Each character's got about a half a page, and the point of view keeps shifting. It's like watching a really fast movie. Margaret Atwood used short chapters in The Handmaid's Tale, and James Patterson, who takes up most of the real estate in my Huntington Beach Central Library, he writes short chapters. So there's that to consider. So another method, next slide, is to write in present tense. And I have to admit, this is my favorite. I'm writing my second novel in present tense. I just gravitate towards it. After I did a little research, I realized it's not really traditional, and some people really don't like it, but it's kind of trendy right now. T. Jefferson Parker just wrote a book called 1,000 Steps, and it's about Laguna Beach in the 1968. It's the first time he's ever written in present tense. I heard an interview where he said he loved it. It does give a sense of urgency. It's a cinematic quality. T. Jeff Parker's not the only one. Suzanne Collins in Hunger Games, that's present tense. My favorite, Anthony Doerr, who wrote All the Light We Cannot See and Cloud Cuckoo Land. Those are both written in present tense. And it's not such a modern concept because Charles Dickens wrote Bleak House in present tense. So it's something that I really like, but some people really do not like it because sometimes the pace is too quick. It doesn't give the reader a chance to examine or contemplate. Sometimes we're too much in the narrator's head. Present tense makes narration really tricky, especially if you're writing first person present tense, because it puts the narrator into the position of being, or it puts the main character into the position of being both narrator and character. So the reader starts thinking, who is this story being told to anyway? Past tense allows the reader to not be aware so much of the narrator. And if you're aware of the narrator, it kind of takes you out of the story. So you might start realizing that I'm saying you can do this, but you can do this, but, because methods don't work for every writer. Stephen King says in his book on writing that most books about writing are filled with bullshit.
Yeah.
So we know from experience everyone doesn't like reading the same things, but my argument is if we understand how our minds respond to what we read, we might be able to predict how a reader responds, or at least understand how they respond. There's a New York Times bestselling author, Carolyn Levitt. She says she would never tell anyone there is one system or one way to write, and I would never do that either. Just like you would never tell anyone what to write about. Because the story and the way you write it are built into your own unique subconscious. I think it helps us to understand how our words might land, but just as writers are obsessed or haunted into writing certain novels, they're equally drawn to different ways of writing. And that's what creativity is all about. So next slide. Oh, next slide.
That was.
Okay, what does work, in my opinion, is learning to respect our own voices, our own preferences, and the choices that we make. So going back to my prejudice that I told you about earlier about blonde women who drive white BMWs, guess what Brenda Lockhart is? She's a blonde woman who drives a white BMW. Because I think even if you're predisposed not to care about a character, if the author can present them on the page realistically and honestly, you want to understand what they're about. So I think honesty is what resonates. And really our choices and our opinions and our preconceptions are what we have. There's I know that's really small, but Jorge Luis Borges says, all that happens to us, including our humiliations, our misfortunes, our embarrassments, all is given to us as raw material, as clay, and that we may shape our art. And I would argue it's not just humiliation and misfortune and embarrassment, it's also the joy and delight and wonder that we find in the world that shapes our art. Okay, next slide. I had to do it. All right, that last part was pretty fast, sorry, but
No.
I want to be respectful of your time, and it's 2:56.
But we have a few minutes for any questions
Yeah,
that anybody has.
Questions, comments? Yes.
I have a question. How do you feel about flashbacks within a chapter, or a flashback as a chapter itself between two chapters, in terms of structure?
I think they're both helpful. I think the tricky part about flashbacks is slowing down the action. I'm not really a fan of flashbacks at the beginning of a story because you need to establish where the reader is and what's going on. But yeah, flashbacks can be really critical because the reader needs to know why the character's like this. So I guess I don't really have a good answer to your question. I think both could be effective.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else want to add to that? Because that's a good question. I think flashbacks, that's another whole workshop, right?
Well, especially if you're writing in the present tense, and all of a sudden a flashback takes you into a different dimension where you
Yeah.
could have been in the past tense. That can break the speed of the
Sure.
reader. Because that's
I personally like it though because it's very clear. Okay, we're going into the past now. Whereas if you're already writing in past tense, then it's a little trickier to do a flashback.
all right.
In my opinion.
Flashbacks can be a way of making nonfiction creative as you're writing it. So instead of telling the story strictly in chronological order, doing flashbacks and that sort of thing would be.
Yeah. I like that idea.
In teaching, my experience with young writers or new writers and the flashbacks is that they forget to bring you back to the present. And so it confuses the reader. So make sure that if you're writing a flashback that you end the flashback. And a lot of times I'll take a manuscript and I'll have to, in bold letters or whatever, write, flashback begins, flashback ends, flashback begins, flashback ends, so that I can then see if it's being structured appropriately. Because my whole work is based on, am I confusing the reader? Or is my student confusing the reader? I'm not a fan of books that you have to, figure out. I want to sit down and read a book and feel like I can just go from the beginning to the end.
So you want to know if it was the same cat or not?
I do. I mean, I don't mind there being mysteries and unanswered questions and things like that, but not structural.
Yeah.
I want to know what year it is. I want to know, what town it is. And
I have trouble with flashbacks sometimes coming back into the present, because you've got to put some kind of signifier that, okay, now we're back.
oh yeah,
where I
no,
left
it's
you.
it's hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
do it seamlessly.
And that can feel kind of clunky sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times people write things like, the sound of the alarm brought her back to the moment,
Yeah.
things like that, the slamming of the door. It's always like some kind of a cue that brings you back, generally awkwardly.
Well, I like how you have the dates with the subheading. I think that's very helpful.
Mhm.
I know that helped my readers
Yeah.
be a lot less confused.
You mean like the
but-
chapter heading, like
Yes,
say?
the subheading with the date and place, when you're doing flashbacks and so forth.
Anybody else? You guys are great. I really appreciate being able to hang out with you, and I think I can learn a lot from all of you. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Well.